She found out on a Tuesday. Not from him, not from her mother. She found out because she walked into the wrong room at the wrong time and saw the two people she loved most in the world standing so close together that the air between them had already disappeared. That image would never leave her. But let's go back, because you need to understand how deep she was in before you can understand how completely she shattered. Isabela Reyes was 23 years old when Dante Cruz walked into her life like a typhoon that forgot to apologize. She had been working at a small events coordination firm in BGC, Bonifacio Global City, organizing corporate dinners and product launches for Manila's upper class. She was good at her job, punctual, precise, the kind of girl who color-coded her planner and remembered everyone's coffee order. She lived in a modest condo in Mandaluyong with her mother, Elena, and she had never once in her 23 years touched anything dangerous. Then she met Dante. He came to one of her events, a private dinner at a rooftop restaurant in BGC, all glass walls and city lights and men in Barong Tagalog who smiled with their teeth but not their eyes. She didn't know who he was. That was apparently part of her appeal. He walked up to her while she was checking her clipboard and said, "You look like the only real person in this room." She looked up. He was tall, dark, dressed in a black suit that looked like it had been cut directly from his body. He had a jaw like architecture and eyes that were almost disturbingly calm, the kind of calm that doesn't come from peace, but from a man who has seen so many terrible things that he has simply stopped reacting to them. "Excuse me?" she said. "Everyone here is performing, smiling at people they hate, laughing at jokes they don't find funny. But you?" He tilted his head. "You're actually working." She should have walked away. She didn't. His name was Dante Cruz, and within 2 weeks, Isabela Reyes was deeply, catastrophically in love with him. What Dante gave her was unlike anything she had ever felt. He gave her attention, the kind that makes you feel like the room has narrowed down to just your face, just your voice, just the movement of your hands when you talk. He remembered everything she said, the name of her childhood dog, the province her Lola came from, the specific kind of halo-halo she liked from the small carinderia near her old school in Pasig. He took her to dinner at places she had only ever organized, never attended. Private rooms, chef's tables, a yacht anchored somewhere between Batangas and Maniro, where the water was so clear it looked invented. He gave her clothes she was too polite to refuse, jewelry she hid in her drawer because she didn't know how to explain them to her mother. But he never fully explained himself. She knew he was powerful. She understood, in the fragmented way people understand things they are afraid to examine clearly, that his money did not come from any boardroom. There were men who followed him, men who stood outside restaurants, men who spoke to him in low voices and then walked away quickly. There were phone calls he took in other rooms. There were nights when he disappeared and came back with an expression she had learned not to ask about. She told herself he was a businessman, a private one. She told herself what she needed to tell herself to keep what they had. The first time her mother met him, Elena Reyes stood in the doorway of their condo and looked at Dante Cruz with an expression that Isabela could not decode. Not fear, not exactly. Something more like recognition. "This is Dante," Isabela said, too cheerfully. Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled the way only mothers know how to smile, with the surface of their face, while their eyes are doing something else entirely. "Dante," she repeated softly, "please come in." He sat in their small living room, in a chair that looked almost comically inadequate for a man of his presence, and he looked around at the space with an expression that was dangerously close to tenderness. He picked up a framed photo from the shelf, a family photo, Isabela and Elena, and a man who was no longer in the picture, literally or figuratively. "Your father?" he asked Isabela. "He left when I was 12, she said, too quickly. Dante looked at the photo for another moment. Then he looked up at Elena. "I'm sorry," he said, and he sounded like he meant it. Elena's smile shifted. Just slightly, just enough. Isabela didn't notice. She should have noticed. 3 months in, Dante told her the truth. Not all of it, enough. They were on his penthouse balcony in Rockwell, 40 floors above Makati, the city spread below them like a map of something too complicated to understand from street level. He had a glass of whiskey. She had her legs tucked beneath her on the outdoor sofa, wearing one of his shirts, watching the lights. "You know what I am," he said. It wasn't a question. She was quiet for a moment. "I have some idea." "The Cruz family," he said. "We control distribution networks across Luzon. We have arrangements with people in government, in law enforcement, in shipping and logistics. We have been doing this for 3 generations." She stared at the city. "Are you afraid of me?" he asked. "I should be," she said. "That's not what I asked." She turned and looked at him. His face was unreadable in the way it always was, but in his eyes there was something raw, something that looked exhaustingly like longing. "No," she said, "I'm not afraid of you." He looked at her like she was the most dangerous thing he had ever encountered. "You should be," he said quietly. "Everyone should be afraid of me." But he pulled her close, and she let him, and she thought, in the way young people in love always think, against all available evidence, that she was different, that she was the one who would change him, that the tenderness she sometimes caught in his eyes when he didn't know she was watching was the real Dante, and everything else was just armor. She was not wrong about the tenderness. She was catastrophically wrong about everything else. 4 months in, he started pulling away. It was subtle at first, a dinner canceled, a call that went unanswered for 3 hours and was explained with a single word, busy and nothing more. A night when she reached for him and he was already asleep or pretending to be. She told herself it was work. His kind of work had a rhythm she would never fully understand, and she had accepted that. But then something else started. He began asking about her mother. It started small. "How is Alina? Is your mother still doing her gardening? What does your mother think about?" And the questions were always framed around Isabela, always made to sound peripheral, casual, incidental. But they came too often. And one evening, when Isabela came home unexpectedly early from a work event that had ended ahead of schedule, she found Dante's car parked outside their building. Her mother's light was on. She stood on the street for 4 minutes, counting. She told herself there was an explanation. He was in the area. He had dropped something off. She went upstairs. When she opened the door, they were sitting at the dining table, her mother and Dante. There was coffee. There was a conversation that stopped the instant the door opened. There was a half-second, just a half-second, where neither of them moved. "Anak," her mother said, "you're home early." Dante looked at her with his usual unreadable calm. "I was in Mandaluyong. I thought I'd check in." "You didn't tell me," Isabela said. "I was going to surprise you," he said, "but you beat me to it." She looked between them. Her mother was composed. Dante was composed. The room was completely, perfectly, suspiciously composed. "I'll make more coffee," her mother said, standing. Isabela sat down across from Dante. He looked at her steadily. "What's happening?" she said quietly. "Nothing," he said. "I wanted to make sure your mother was all right. You mentioned she hadn't been sleeping well." She had mentioned that 2 weeks ago in passing, in a conversation she barely remembered. He had remembered. She didn't know what to do with that, so she did what she had been doing for months, which was to take the thing that frightened her and put it somewhere she didn't have to look at it. "Stay for dinner," she said. "Of course," he said. Her mother made sinigang. The 3 of them ate together. The conversation was entirely normal. Isabela laughed twice at things Dante said, and both times she noticed her mother looking down at her plate. Something was different. She could feel it like a change in air pressure before a storm. She just couldn't name it yet.
Elena Reyes was 47 years old, and she was the kind of beauty that had nothing to do with effort. She was the sort of woman who wore a plain duster at home and still stopped people mid-sentence. High cheekbones, dark, intelligent eyes, the posture of someone who had been through enough that they no longer needed to perform composure. They simply had it. She worked as an administrative director for a private hospital in Quezon City. She was efficient. She was respected. She was, as far as Isabela had always understood, completely unavailable, emotionally, romantically, in every way that mattered. After her husband left, Elena Reyes had closed a door and never reopened it. Or so Isabela believed. What Isabela did not know, what nobody had told her, because some truths are protected by the people who carry them, was that Ramon Villarreal had been the second in command of the Cruz family, Dante's father's right hand. He had died in a raid in Cavite when Elena was 22, and Elena had packed that life into a box and moved to Manila and become someone entirely different and raised her daughter as far from that world as she possibly could. She had never told Isabela. And when Dante Cruz walked into their living room for the first time, Elena had recognized not just the world he came from, but the specific weight he carried in his eyes. The loneliness that lives in powerful men who have nobody they can be honest with. The exhaustion of always being the most dangerous person in any room. She had loved a man like that once, and it had broken her in ways she had spent 25 years carefully plastering over.
The night Dante ended things with Isabela, there was no dramatic scene. That was somehow the worst part. He took her to dinner at a quiet restaurant in Salcedo Village, not one of the spectacular places, but a small, intimate place with low lighting and tables far enough apart that you could speak privately. He ordered her favorite, grilled tanige and garlic rice, and he waited until they had eaten to speak. "This has to end," he said. She put down her fork. "Isabela," he said, "you deserve something I am not capable of giving you." "Don't do that," she said. Her voice was perfectly level. She was holding herself together by force of will alone. "Don't make this about what I deserve. Tell me the truth." He looked at her. For a long moment he said nothing. "There are things happening in my world that are getting more dangerous," he said. "I cannot have you near me right now." "Then I'll wait," she said. "No," he said quietly, "you won't." The way he said it, "you won't," not a dismissal, not cruelty, something that sounded terrifyingly like a decision that had already been made, a door already closed, a verdict arrived at through some private process she had not been part of. "Is there someone else?" she asked. The question sat between them. "No," he said, and he was not lying, technically. There was no else yet. There was only a pull toward something he was still fighting. There was only a feeling he had not yet named, orbiting a woman he had no right to be thinking about. "I love you," Isabela said. Her voice cracked on the last word, just slightly, like a hairline fracture in glass. "I know," he said. "I'm sorry." He paid the bill. He walked her to a taxi. He put her inside like she was something fragile. He closed the door. She watched him through the window as the taxi pulled away. He was already on his phone. She did not cry until she was inside their building. She made it all the way up to the 7th floor, all the way down the corridor, all the way to the front door of the condo before her legs stopped working properly, and she sat down on the floor of the hallway and pressed her back against the wall and let everything come apart. Her mother found her there 4 minutes later, coming home from the night shift.
Elena sat down on the floor next to her daughter without a word and put her arm around her and held her while she cried. She held her for a long time, and she did not tell her daughter what she had been carrying for weeks. It was Isabela's office mate, Tricia, who told her. She hadn't meant to. It came out sideways, the way terrible truths usually do in the middle of a conversation about something else entirely. They were having lunch near their office in BGC 3 weeks after the breakup, and Tricia mentioned she had seen Isabela's mother the weekend before. At the peninsula? Isabela said, absently. She had some hospital function. She wasn't at a hospital function, Tricia said carefully. She was having dinner at that Japanese place in Makati. A pause. He looked... She hesitated. He looked a lot like... I only saw Dante a few times, so I could be wrong, but... Isabela's fork was on the table. She didn't remember putting it down.
She didn't ask her mother directly. Not at first. She watched. She noticed things she had dismissed before. Her mother's phone face down on the counter, a new perfume, a jacket left on the chair that her mother touched briefly, almost involuntarily when she walked past it. The way Elena sometimes looked at her own phone with an expression that was private in a way Isabela had never seen before. Private and complicated and somewhere between afraid and alive. She went through her mother's phone. She hated herself for it. She did it anyway. The messages were not explicit. They were, in some ways, worse than explicit. They were intimate in the way that goes deeper than the physical. They were conversations, long, late-night conversations about things that mattered. Dante asking Elena about her past. Elena asking Dante about what he was trying to build. Arguments about choices, confessions, a message from Dante at 2 a.m. that said simply, "I haven't been able to stop thinking about our conversation," and a message from her mother that said, "Neither have I. That frightens me more than you know." Isabela read every message. Then she put the phone down exactly where she had found it and went to her room and sat on her bed and did not move for 40 minutes. When she came out, her mother was in the kitchen making dinner, adobo. The smell filled the entire apartment, completely, obscenely normal. "Mama," Isabela said. Her mother was stirring the pot. "Are you happy?" Elena turned around. She looked at her daughter for a long moment with the careful, searching look of a woman who is trying to understand exactly how much has already been uncovered. "Anak, just answer me," Isabela said. "Are you happy right now, in your life?" A long silence. "I don't know yet," Elena said quietly. Isabela nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. Then she turned and walked back to her room and spent the entire night deciding what to do about what she now knew. She called Dante at midnight. He picked up on the second ring. "You're with my mother," Isabela said. No introduction, no preamble. Silence. "Isabela, don't," she said. "Don't tell me I'm wrong. Don't tell me I misunderstood. Just..." Her voice broke and she steadied it the way she had been steadying things all her life. "Just tell me the truth, for once, please." A long pause. Outside her window, the Mandaluyong skyline glittered obliviously. "Nothing physical has happened," he said. "That's not what I asked." Another silence. "Yes," he said finally. "I have feelings for your mother." The words hit her like a physical impact. Even though she knew, even though she had known for weeks, the confirmation was its own distinct kind of destruction. "You are my mother," Isabela said slowly. "She's 47 years old. She's my mother. You were with me 4 weeks ago. I know. You sat at our table and ate dinner with us, and you knew." "I fought it," Isabela said, and there was something in his voice she had never heard before, something that sounded like actual pain. "Isabela, I fought it. This is not something I chose." "Stop," she said. "Stop talking." She ended the call. She sat in the dark. Then something cold and very clear moved through her, like a temperature change in still water, and Isabela Reyes made a decision that would change everything.
She went to her mother's room. Elena was awake, sitting up in bed with the lamp on, her hands folded in her lap, waiting. She had been expecting this. "Tell me everything," Isabela said. And Elena did. She told her daughter about Ramon, about being 22 and in love with a man from a world she never should have entered, about his death and the way she had rebuilt herself, about the moment Dante walked into their living room and she had felt, with the horror she still couldn't fully name, the specific gravity of the man he was. "He reminded you of him," Isabela said. "Yes," Elena said, "but it's more than that. Dante he's not Ramon. He is his own person. He is complicated and damaged, and he comes from something terrible. But he is also—" "Don't," Isabela said sharply. Elena stopped. "Don't tell me his qualities," Isabela said. Her voice was shaking. "Don't sit in front of me and tell me what you love about the man who was with me, who told me he loved me, She pressed her hand over her mouth for a moment. "He used me to get to you." "I don't think that's true." "Mama." Elena looked at her mother with an expression that Elena would carry with her for years. "He told me himself. He fought it, which means he was feeling it while we were together. He was falling for you while I was falling for him. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand what you're asking me to accept?" Elena had nothing to say to that, because there was nothing to say. What happened next happened quickly because in Dante's world, time was not a luxury he was regularly afforded. The dangerous thing that had been building in the background of the story, the external threat he had vaguely referenced when he broke up with Isabela, arrived. A rival organization, the Salazar Network, operating out of Cebu and expanding aggressively into Luzon, had been making moves against the Cruz family for months. Dante had been managing it, containing it, handling it with the cold precision he applied to all threats. But someone had given the Salazar Network information, internal information, routes, names, the location of certain warehouses in Laguna and Bulacan, information that could only have come from inside. Someone inside the Cruz organization had betrayed him. And when Dante's people traced the leak, they traced it to a man named Bernard Ocampo, who had been with the Cruz family for 11 years, who had attended Dante's father's funeral, who had been trusted absolutely. Bernard Ocampo, it turned out, had a separate arrangement with the Salazar Network, and Bernard Ocampo was Elena Reyes's first cousin. When Dante came to the condo to tell Elena, Isabela was home. She opened the door. They looked at each other, the man she had loved and the wreckage he had made of her family, and neither of them spoke for a moment. "I need to speak to your mother," he said. "About what?" she said. He told her. Not all of it. Enough. The color left Isabela's face. "Bernard, Tito Bernard." He didn't know how deep this would go, Dante said. He made a deal to protect himself from deaths. He didn't understand the full consequence. But the Salazar Network is not a forgiving organization, and now that the leak has been identified, your mother's family connection to Bernard makes her a potential target, Isabela finished. "Yes." She stepped back from the door. He came in. Elena appeared from the hallway. She looked at Dante and then at her daughter, and she seemed to understand instantly that something had collapsed. "Elena," Dante said, "we need to move you tonight."
And that was the moment the story stopped being about love and became about survival. Elena refused to leave. They argued, Dante intense and controlled, Elena absolutely immovable, in the way that certain women are immovable, not through aggression, but through a quality of stillness that is more powerful than any raised voice. "I am not going to run from something my family's foolishness created," she said. "This isn't about guilt. I know what it's about," she said quietly. I was in this world once, Dante. I know exactly what it's about. He looked at her, and in that look, in the way his jaw shifted and his eyes changed, that was when Isabela, standing in the doorway, watching, understood with absolute finality that it was real, that whatever was between them was real, that she had not misread it, that there was a language passing between these two people that had nothing to do with her. She had thought understanding it would feel like relief. It felt like drowning. She went to Bernard. It took her 2 days to find him, through a chain of relatives and an old phone number her mother kept in a physical address book. She drove to a house in Antipolo without telling anyone. She sat across from her mother's elderly cousin in a hot living room with an electric fan that rattled, and she asked him one question. "Did you know they would come after my mother?" He looked at her with the eyes of a man who had been carrying shame for months. "I didn't think it would go this far," he said. "But you knew the risk." A long pause. "I knew the risk." She drove home. She sat in the parking garage for 22 minutes. Then she made a phone call that she would replay in her mind for the rest of her life. She called the Salazar Network's contact number, a number she had found in Bernard's phone while his back was turned. She told them that Bernardo Campo had been identified. She told them that the Cruz family was going to move against him. She told them the address in Antipolo. She told herself she was protecting her mother by directing the threat away from their family. She told herself Bernard had brought this on himself. She told herself a lot of things in that parking garage. She drove upstairs. She said nothing. Bernardo Campo disappeared from the house in Antipolo 36 hours later. They found him 4 days after that. Dante came to the condo when they found him. He stood in the living room. He looked at Elena, and then he looked at Isabela, and something in his face shifted. "Someone told them where he was," he said. Elena looked at her daughter. Isabela looked at the floor. The silence in that room was the loudest thing any of them had ever experienced. "Isabela," her mother said softly. "He wasn't innocent," Isabela said, her voice barely audible. "He made a deal that put you at risk. He was my family," Elena said. "And you are my mother." The words landed like a final verdict.
Dante stood very still. He was watching Isabela with an expression that contained something she had never seen in his face before when he looked at her. Not love, not desire, not even the gentle sympathy he had offered when things ended. He was looking at her with something that looked like recognition, like he was seeing, for the first time, what she was capable of. "You made a call," he said quietly, not a question. She said nothing. "You made a call," he repeated, "to the Salazar Network." Still nothing. "Do you understand what you've done?" he said. "Not what you meant to do, what you did. You made contact with an organization that has been trying to destroy my family. You gave them a location. You inserted yourself into a war you don't—" "I was protecting her," Isabela said. She raised her eyes. There were no tears. That surprised everyone in the room, including herself. "I was protecting my mother. From your world, the world you dragged us into." Dante stopped, controlled himself. "You think this started with me? Your mother was in this world before you were born, before I was born." Isabela turned to Elena. Elena looked like she had aged 10 years in 10 seconds. "How much more?" Isabela said. "Is there that you haven't told me?" Elena told her. All of it this time. She told her about Ramon. She told her about the years she had spent on the edges of the Cruz family's world, young and in love and not fully understanding what she was embedded in. She told her about the night of the raid and the weeks after and the decision she made to disappear entirely from that life. She told her about the box she had never opened. She told her that she had kept a photograph of Ramon in an envelope at the back of her closet for 25 years.
She told her that the reason she had responded to Dante's gravity, despite knowing better, despite every wall she had built, was that she recognized him in a way that went beyond resemblance. Not because of who he looked like, because of what he was carrying. Because lonely, powerful, damaged men have a specific frequency, and once you have loved one, your body recognizes the signal, even when your mind is screaming to run. "I'm sorry," Elena said. "I am so sorry. I never wanted." "I know," Isabela said.
She stood up. She looked at Dante. "Take care of her," she said. "If you're going to be in her life, and I cannot stop you, clearly none of this can be stopped, then take care of her, because I swear to you, if anything happens to my mother because of the life you live, what I did to Bernard will look like nothing." The room was very still. Dante looked at her for a long moment. "You're more like her than you know," he said quietly. It was not a compliment. It was not an insult. It was simply the truest thing he had ever said to her. Isabela moved out 1 week later. She found a small studio in Cubao. She took almost nothing. She left her mother's jewelry where it was. She took her planner, her work clothes, her grandmother's rosary. She did not cry when she left. She did not call anyone for 3 weeks. She worked. She organized corporate dinners and product launches and private events in BGC, and she was, as she had always been, punctual and precise, and very good at her job. Her colleagues noticed she was quieter. She told them she had gone through a breakup, and they accepted that and moved on, and life continued its relentless, indifferent forward motion. She sent her mother a message at the end of the 3rd week. "I love you. I don't understand what happened. I may never fully understand it, but I love you."
Her mother replied within 30 seconds. "I love you more than anything I have ever loved. I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of that." Isabela stared at her phone for a long time. Then she put it face down on her desk and went back to work. 6 months later, Dante Cruz stood in front of a mirror in a hotel in Quezon City, adjusting the collar of his barong Tagalog. Behind him, reflected in the glass, Isabela Reyes was sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, watching him with the expression she reserved for moments when she forgot to compose herself, the one that was unguarded and slightly terrified, and real in the way that very few things in either of their lives had ever been real. "You're nervous," she said. "I'm not nervous." "Your hands are doing the thing," she said. He looked down at his hands. He had been adjusting his collar for approximately 3 minutes longer than necessary. "She might not come," he said. "She said she would come." "She has reasons not to." "She has more reasons too," Isabela said quietly. "She's my daughter. Whatever she is now, and she is something harder than she was, I know that, and that is partly on both of us. She is still my daughter. She will come." He turned from the mirror. "Isabela," he said. She looked at him. "I know I cannot undo what I did to her," he said, "and I know that what exists between us was built on something that caused damage. I know all of that, but—" "I know," she said. "I know. Do you regret it?" The question sat in the room.
She was quiet for a long time. She looked at her hands. She thought about Ramon, and the girl she had been, and the years she had spent closed, and the specific, exhausting work of keeping yourself away from the things that make you feel alive. "No," she said. "I regret the harm. I do not regret you." He crossed the room. He sat beside her. He took her hand. They stayed like that for a while. Isabela arrived 20 minutes after the ceremony had begun. She stood in the back of the small garden, a private venue in Antipolo, of all places, which struck her with a dark irony she filed away to process later. And she watched her mother walk through the gathered guests toward something new, something Isabela did not fully understand yet, and might never fully accept. But she watched, and at some point during the quiet reception that followed, her mother found her at the back of the garden, and they stood together under a wide acacia tree, and said nothing for a long time, because some moments do not need words. "I want to be okay with this," Isabela said finally. "I know," her mother said. "I'm not there yet. I know, but I'm here." Isabela took her daughter's hand. "That's everything," she said softly. Across the garden, Dante Cruz watched the two of them standing together under the tree. And for a man who had spent his entire life surrounded by people who needed things from him, loyalty, money, protection, fear, something in his chest did something it had almost no practice doing. It settled.
But here is what nobody in that garden knew.
Here is the thing that Isabela had not told her mother, had not told Dante, had told no one. 3 weeks before the ceremony, she had received a call from an unknown number. A man from the Salazar network. Not threatening, not aggressive. Informational, in the way that powerful people are sometimes informational when they want something from you later. He told her that the call she had made from the parking garage, the information she had given them about Bernard, had been recorded. He told her that this recording existed. He told her that as long as things remained quiet and undisturbed, the recording would remain exactly where it was. And then he said one final thing before he hung up. He said, "Your mother's new husband has more enemies than she knows, and now, so do you." The call lasted 90 seconds. Isabela had stood in her small Cubao studio, phone in hand, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, and understood with complete clarity that she had not escaped her mother's world. She had simply entered it from a different door. She deleted the call from her log. She went to the ceremony. She stood under the acacia tree and held her mother's hand. And she smiled. Because the one thing that growing up in Isabela Reyes' shadow had taught her, the one thing that love and betrayal and grief and a parking garage in Mandaluyong had taught her, was that the women in their family had always known how to hold terrible things inside them and keep walking. Her mother had done it for 25 years. Isabela was only just beginning. Some families are broken by secrets. Some are built on them. And in the Reyes women, the line between the two had always been invisible, right up until the moment it wasn't.
Please like and subscribe.